Of course, I mean, I'm seeing this happening now to the Gulf countries. They have been attacked, cyber attack, and the access was the remote access, VPNs and VNC and SSH, wherever, Telnet. And the Poland, the latest Poland attack, I think it was through also remotely. I think they've done it, right?
Yeah, and actually, God, you're getting me, because I've been telling myself to read that, but I've been doing so much development that I've fallen off on some of my reading, and I haven't read that. It's fortunately one of the other instructors, Tyler Webb, has been really involved in some of that stuff. His team with Dragos actually has, gets a lot of inside information and that their research teams are doing, but I'm guessing that they've got clients in that area, and so they're able to see some of those things. But definitely the remote access, things hanging off. That I think it really goes to the relationships. It's not just attacking one company anymore. It's you attack one thing in one company, which gets you access to this other thing, which gets you access to this other thing, and threat actors are really chaining these things together. And I think that's why we really emphasize. And it's difficult to demonstrate in a lab, right? How do you demonstrate compromising 3 different organizations so you can have it impact on a 4th, right? That whole data flow, workflow, and stuff like that. So how do you think like that? And especially when you're tasked to do an assessment on one organization, you can't assess the other ones. It's outside the scope, right? So that logic is difficult. It's difficult to understand. It's difficult to get a cybersecurity program around, but threat actors don't have to wait for us to understand it. They're just taking advantage of it.
Yeah, exactly. So I mean, you are a podcaster as well. So we are like partners, whatever.
You are more consistent. I'm a periodic podcaster, so I just kind of like as we're going through, and whenever I can sucker people into doing it, then I do it. So it's I've got a few things out there. I try to do it more consistently. I found myself talking to myself a lot, and so I got used to talking. The whole COVID thing, where we couldn't be around anybody, right? And so we had to we became our own best friends. So it's so I have the Tom from ICS Village, Thomas Van Norman, and I we did the Simply ICS Cyber. I put those up on the Cutaway Security YouTube. I think there's 16 videos. I think we talked to 14 different people about their different experiences, from water to electrical to maritime. And whether it's 62443 ICS, the SANS ICS 5 critical controls. So there's a lot of stuff out there, and also I put a lot of videos out, especially around the COVID timeframe. Just recorded videos around ICS concepts. So that's out on the SANS ICS YouTube. And it's about 30 different videos of different concepts, talking to some people, and just discussing, some of the things that we're talking about right now, just kind of getting into helping people, introduce people to these topics, to this thought process. So I've done my best to put that out there.
Yeah, I mean, I saw your concepts when they were out back then. They were quite useful. I mean, like the Modbus, when you analyze the Modbus protocol and
yes, I mean, I don't want to do another one on that. So it's like after I do a few of those, analyzing different protocols, how to break things down. It can be a challenge to come up with new ideas. Like I don't want to revamp and actually. That's one of the things that we kind of took into the new class for SANS, the 613. We didn't want another class on Modbus, right? Okay. So, I mean, don't describe Modbus again, right? But let's talk about ENIP. Let's talk about these other industrial protocols. And so we've done our best to start working some of those things in to some of the labs and the assessments. But yeah, no, absolutely. So you start with the basics. You learn that foundation, which is kind of why I put out those concepts, kind of speed up that foundational awareness. pointing people where they can get a little bit more information, and then just encourage them to start researching on their own and doing projects like yours, which was, seeing something, hey, I think this might be interesting, and then just pulling that thread a little bit. It's seeing how far it takes you. If it takes you to something interesting, great. But at the same time, you're learning how to interact with the technologies. You're teaching yourself, and that makes you more valuable to your team. I'm big on the team. The reason why I do all of this is I think of all of us as a team, and and putting that out there. So
yeah, so you're a team worker, I can tell, because you come from army, and it's always team.
Marines.
Yes, team spirit. Yes, I served in the army, but it was compulsory service. So I know what you mean. It was 2 years, but it was good. I learned something.
Were you technical in the army, or were you a grunt like me?
No, not technical. It was training ground.
Okay.
They teach weapons and all these kind of trainings.
Yeah, so you and I are very similar. So we went through some of the very similar stuff.
Yes. It was a compulsory service. In Kuwait, we have a compulsory service. Every man should join the army after 18 years old to serve. Okay. And then, what I meant, the teamwork, also you are with ICS Village. So,
yes.
What do you do in ICS Village?
I just volunteer for whatever they need. Okay. I do a lot of, and I've kind of worked my way through, with any organization, any relationship like that. You kind of, I do what Tom and Bryson need for me at that time. So I've managed the website for a while, and then, I try to do as much training, but definitely whenever I'm going to conferences, cybersecurity conference, S4, some of the smaller, large ones, small ones, if I can make it to the conference, and they'll reach out to me, hey, can you show up at this? We don't have anybody at this conference, but they want a table. Can you drive up to San Antonio and do that? And I'll volunteer for it. And so I'll just sit at the table and basically answer questions. And sometimes we send in equipment, and so we'll have equipment there. It just like any conference table, there's, it's every hour, it's like 5 minutes of talking to somebody, 50 minutes of just sitting by yourself, 5 minutes going to the bathroom. But the I stand there, wait for people, and I work on projects, and or might be just playing with the tools that we brought to show people how to do things. Or talking to some of the other people. So with ICS Village, I just volunteer my time and just kind of do what Tom needs me to do to help with the community.
Nice. Yeah, I met Tom, and what's the other guy name?
Bryson. So Bryson.
Bryson. Okay. I met them in Kuwait. In 2019, they came in a conference, and I saw their test bed, and I talked to them. I videoed them. Even I have the video in my podcast. Excellent. I talked to Newman, and I talked to Bison, and they explained ICS Village. It was fun to meet them as well. And talk to them.
And I think last year, so they go out when they can. They used to send a lot of equipment, and now that's become a challenge. Shipping is a huge expense, especially with some of the sizes of some of the stuff we do. So they've actually scaled down some of the stuff, but definitely we try to get people out there to talk about it at the very least. And I know that Tom just got back from Bahrain. He was out there last year.
I've been told by Bahraini people. They told me.
Okay.
They saw him. Yes.
So they brought him out, and it's just so they do. A lot of stuff in North America, maybe even Canada. A few times they go to Europe, but Middle East as well. So yeah, it's good. They devote a lot of time and effort to the community and just to learning out there. So
nice. I think part of why they came to Kuwait back then, I think that was before COVID, so the prices there were lower for transport and shipping. I think. Much cheaper. I'm sure you noticed even everything skied up after the COVID.
Yes, absolutely. I know, and I noticed that with all of my travel. And actually, I'm about to find out what is going on out there. How much I've got to plan a teaching trip right now, and I'm kind of dreading going to look at what that cost is going to be.
And I'm sure the prices are up now because of the war in Kuwait. Because
Absolutely, 100%.
yeah,
Unfortunate.
yes, unfortunately. So are you one of the authors of 613 in Sans?
So yes, there's three of us, myself, Tyler, and Jason Deely. We all bring unique perspectives to this.
So what
Jason
is the
Deely,
syllabus?
say again.
Sorry, what is the syllabus? What is it about?
So it is really kind of taking that security assessment penetration test approach, and we're trying to ensure that people can do security assessments all the way up to a penetration test. And certainly the focus is on penetration testing, because I think we can all agree we want to test our implementations to ensure that our controls are working correctly as we expected, to identify things we didn't understand, especially around those relationships that we talked about. What are the things that we didn't realize, we didn't understand? What is the connectivity that is enabled, or did they actually disable that service, right? They said they did. In the documentation, it says they did. But did they actually do it? Because those are what threat actors are going to take advantage of. And so the syllabus is really kind of helping people understand, what does it take to assess these environments? We take a passive to an active approach, meaning that, and I actually do this in class. It's not the wild, wild west. It's not the pew, 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 pew. We're used to, and the reason why I say that is a lot of IT pen tests are that wild west. Give me an IP address on the corporate network. I'm going to go find evil. I'm going to scan everything. I'm going to interact with everything. If something's vulnerable, I'm going to take advantage of it. I'm going to exploit that vulnerability. I'm going to establish persistence, pivot to other areas, and work my way through to something that's interesting. Not domain admin. I know, domain admin isn't interesting. It's getting to that legal information, or getting to the network admin and taking over the network and stuff like that. So, but there's not a lot of guardrails in there. And if you allowed people to do that in production environments, it's one scan on the wrong subnet, or accidentally scanning the wrong subnet, because we all make mistakes, we're human, could set off a trip of vibrations sensor that brings the whole plant down, not just a process that you're working on, the whole plant. Okay. And so that is an issue. We have to teach people how to do these things, to understand what I like to call, I'm trying not to call them vulnerabilities. You can't get away from calling vulnerabilities, but I like to call them implementation issues. What choices did we make to implement this environment, to do what we're supposed to do, to understand the risk? Okay. And risk is important to all OT. The engineers want to understand the risk, like what's the risk of fire? What's the risk of mechanical failure? What is the digital risk for this implementation? So they want to understand that. They just don't know how to do it. So the course not only kind of teaches people and demonstrates to people how to take that passive approach, doing kind of bench testing, which is looking at the hardware, looking at what services are on there, how to gather that information in a lab environment, or just through reading documentation. Okay. And then how to progress, how to use that as a vulnerability management program, feed into, here's the issues that we need to identify, right? To passively go fix them and reduce the vulnerabilities, those implementation issues, but then to test. Okay, now we've set these things up. Now we're going to do a pen test, but it can't be the wild, wild west. We have to have specific goals. And Tyler actually built this in, and he's kind of talked, he kind of sold me on this, and I'm using this now, which is value. Okay, any security assessment, particularly a pen test, has to have value to the actual production environment. How are we protecting that production environment? What are we testing to? Are our goals of that test, which is anywhere from 1 to 5 days, right? Can we achieve value, reduce risk within that environment? And so we have to really focus. And so we outline how to focus those security assessments and penetration tests to provide value to the operational environment. So when you ask what does it entail? What is the kind of like the syllabus? The syllabus is up online, but that's kind of that logical. We take it from a passive bench testing, gathering information, reading, making some information choices, and then moving up into a pen test and actually doing a pen test. We have a student kit that we have, but then we also have a DCS, distributed control system that is simulating a liquid natural gas environment. And so the students interact with that a little bit. We have to be careful because we don't want them to break the $250,000 controller, but we allow them to interact with the software, interact with that, and then eventually kind of tie into, okay, so how does this fit into your management program, your security management program? So really kind of talking about standards, talking about 62443, right? Because those are how we organize some of these assessments, but also get that information. You know, it's one thing to make a pen test and write a report, but how does that help? And that might help tactically, that helps that one process. Well, how does leadership extend that across the rest of the organizations? One of the things I hate about doing assessments is I'll do a pen test or a security assessment on one process, and then they'll hire me to do it on the next process, like same company, but that next process made the same mistakes as the other one. Why are you paying me to do it twice, right? So you have to have a vulnerability management program that is distributing that information, and that's an important aspect out of that. And so that's also a part of the curriculum that we teach, is helping to everybody understand, okay, this feeds into this organization, or excuse me, into this management program, but also this is what makes helps you achieve or move closer to implementing 62443 more correctly. So
it's based on the methodology and not the tools, right? You don't really emphasize on the tools, right?
Yes, no, it's, I mean, we teach some tools, right? And we try to mix it up a little bit so that, you know, look, there's a lot of other SANS pen test class, right?
Yes.
And there's 600 level. This is a 600 level class. And I like to say that, you know, it's, we're in, you know, the 600 level in this class is that OT side. It's mirroring up the cybersecurity and the OT side, the critical thinking, the being able to look at information, passively make changes, right? Passively make recommendations in really improving your foundation around that knowledge transfer, knowledge information gathering and knowledge transfer from a passive standpoint, and then taking those skills you already have for pen tests. And for those that don't have that, giving them some skills, but not really basing it around a specific tool, right? And so it's really important for us to help people. And one of the biggest things that, you know, Tyler's really kind of building into this, but it's all of our approaches, is how to live off the land. Okay, the threat act. First of all, you know, it's the whole the threat actors live off the land. You don't have your security tools in these areas. So how do you do a security assessment without your tools? How do you do it without Metasploit or without a Cobalt Strike or any of these other tools you normally would have? Look, there's not a, I read about, you know, pen testing organizations that do a great job, you know, with setting up C2 and have all of this exchange information. Well, if there's no direct connection to the internet or it's through a VPN, how do you do C2? Right. So, you know, we help people understand that kind of paradigm shift. It doesn't mean that there's not C2 going on, but it's implemented in a slightly different way. So the real 600 level, although there's some very technical stuff in there, the real 600 level is, can you change your mindset from how you think about security assessments, pen tests, and shift yourself so that it's valuable to an OT operator? That's the challenge. And it's actually, it's hard. I mean, because it's hard for people to make that, you know, and one of the things I was talking about, I was writing up the other day, it's like, look, you don't have your normal tools, right? So how do you gather system information to make a decision on whether it's configured correctly? Like, okay, so fine. I've got this PowerShell script. Great. Well, it's an XP system. It doesn't have a PowerShell on it. So when was the last time you went back to the command prompt and did all of, not just one command, to figure out what the password policy is. No, do your whole assessment running from the command prompt. Can you do that? That's the challenge in these OT environments, right? Because you don't have your tools now. And then on top of all of that, from a security assessment standpoint, you have to keep track, keep good notes, understand what changes you made, document those so that you can change them back, right? So, keep, doubling down on those skills for documentation and relating that information. And one of the other biggest skill sets is how do you relate risk correctly, right? I mean, one of the things I hate every time I read a new report from somebody that says they're into OT, right, and they're doing security assessments in OT. If I see like a self-signed certificate, here's a finding, high risk finding, self-signed certificate, I immediately know that they don't know what they're talking about. SSL ghost, the ghost attack, right? Because of SSL, weak SSL. How many packets does it take to actually implement that attack? And you're in a control environment that's not connected to the internet. It has nothing to do with it, right? And I see reports like that have no value and actually are focusing on the wrong things in these environments. And that's what our class is, kind of helping people shift that mentality, both from a tool set, but also in the output expectation. How do you make things valuable so that the environments are more resilient and are doing what they need to do at the moment they need to do it? And we haven't even started talking about safety in instrumented systems.
Oh, that's a big topic.
Look at your face like, whoa.
So, I mean, from your experience as an instructor and also a founder of a business, do you think the companies in the US and worldwide, they are requesting pen testers to do for the OT environment, or it's not required anymore? Or how is the market?
No, it's definitely a requirement. Now, I do think there's a shift right now. I kind of, and this is me personally, yes. I think there's people are trying to understand this. They don't know where things are going. I think they're realizing that they're people. They're paying for assessments. They're putting up money that they were gifted because they didn't have this on the OT, the operational expenditure side. They didn't predict that they needed to have a pen test or security assessment. So they didn't have any money, so that somebody had to give them money to do this. Then they got the assessment, whether it was good or bad, because this has happened both sides. And now they're just like reading this piece of paper and like, oh, okay, well, I'll go turn that off. What was the value in that, right? And so it's, so the value might have been there. Just because you write it and you write it well, it doesn't mean that the person that's ingesting it, that's reading it, understands it, right? And that's why, in my mind, and this is why I fight really hard to keep the standard stuff into our class, because that really boils down to what's important. It's all of these, whether it's a security assessment or a pen test, this is all feeding into a security management program. You tactically help that one area that you're assessing, but your leadership should be using that information to help them understand what is actually going on within their operational environments. There's some consistencies from process to process, even though they're different. There's some small things that they can change to have a big impact across their whole environment. And to me, that's more valuable, is understanding that. And so understanding how it fits into a program, that vulnerability management, which IT doesn't know. They don't know it. They just push out these reports. Well, what are you writing this report to? How is it more effective, tactically and strategically? But to come back around to your question, I do think people are asking for it, but I think there's been a slowdown in some of those requests because they don't know how to action it. And so, and that takes the security program, and that takes a practice security program. Who has that? Well, gas and oil. Gas and oil has that. So they usually have a pretty robust a program around that. In North America, I don't know outside of North America, but in my experience, typically utilities, because they were predictive. And so they've been doing this for the past 10 years, which is how I started, right? So utilities are usually on that advance. But when we're talking about rail, when we're talking about manufacturing, when we're talking about some of these other industrial sectors that they're playing catch up. They're 10, 15 years behind. And that was okay. And then AI happened. And and now it's and so they're gonna have to. They don't have 10 years to catch up. We were already saying they didn't have 10 years to catch up, right? You better do things faster. Well, AI is making it so that you don't have time at all to catch up. You need to start fixing things now. So yes, but they still don't know how to. What does that mean? How do I assess that? How do I analyze that? And which is what I think is that people like me that are doing security assessments and stuff like that, we need to simplify. We need to simplify. We need to stop thinking about all of these different domains. Web and mobile, and I think all of those are important. I'm not saying that not having a foundation in each one of those domains isn't important. However, if we want to protect things, those operations, the delivery of service, the delivery of product, if we want to protect that, there's 5 things. Those SANS 5 ICS critical controls, being able to respond, remote access, your segmentation and isolation, monitoring. Okay, those 5 things are what's important, and vulnerability management is the last one. Those 5 things we should focus on understanding. What are we doing here? Identifying a scope, looking at this important aspect, answer those 5 questions, then move on to the next thing. Nice. And pass our lessons from that to the bigger organizations so that they can make decisions. Do we see this across everybody? Okay, let's solve that problem. Let's solve that solution. And I've seen gas and oil move fast on this. I've seen an organization 180 move in a completely different direction. And you know what it took? Ransomware. They got ransomware in their IT environment, realized that they could have had a colonial pipeline, and they didn't, but it changed. They were just like, okay, we're done. We're doing this correctly now. And they completely shifted all their stuff. Now, I was coming in to do that assessment, which was, okay, did we do it right? What did we miss? Which is what a pen test is for. And we found some excellent findings and some business things that they needed to adjust, right? It's not just changing the operations. It's changing the business data flow, how business units are getting access to information, because they all want it right now. They're going to have to change their perspective as well. That comes down from leadership. So we need to get we got leadership the information. Hey, your business unit is still asking for this. They're making it insecure, right? And so it's so I think it's important to get back to your question. I'm sorry, I keep going off on tangents, but people are trying to figure out, how do we understand that? How do we accept that information and use it so that it's valuable? And so I kind of feel like the industry is paused, and they also don't understand what this AI stuff is. Like, okay, all this AI stuff, should I be investing in it? Should I not? How is it going to help? So I think people are hoping things will settle and they can start making decisions and do things. It's not going to settle. I mean, I just got off a phone call right here, like, talking to somebody about, like, okay, well, I'm just going to let it settle. And my mentor is just like, no, it's not going to settle. It's just going to keep moving fast. And if you don't keep up with this right now and have people thinking about it, asking about it, making some decisions to keep moving forward, if you're not doing that, you're just going to be behind. You're just going to be behind. So use some information, gather this information, make decisions, right or wrong, at least it's a decision, and then move forward, which is why from the military, we're good at that. That's why we gravitate to this industry, is because we're okay with making a decision right now, assessing it and saying, okay, that didn't work. All right, let's pivot. But now we have more information to pivot, right? So another reason why military kind of gravitates to that, because we're okay with kind of making those choices. We don't need a lot of information. Our OODA loop is tighter.
Yes, that's the fact. Okay, so as a business owner, I mean, you are the founder of Cutaway Security.
Cutaway Security, yes, sir.
Cutaway Security. Do you apply the 5 controls when you visit an organization? If it's disconnected from the internet, how do you approach this organization based on the 5 controls?
So two of my mentors, so completely disconnected, air gapped. And a lot of people like to say that.
Yes.
Two of my mentors are SANS instructors, and they're actual friends of mine. Ed Scotus, who's a SANS fellow. Both of them are SANS fellows, so they've been teaching for a long time. But Ed said that if it's got an IP address,
Okay.
then it has a path to the internet. Okay, so when you're talking about air gapping solutions, right? Okay, you and I both know that if there's no Ethernet, it's all serial based. Okay.
Yes.
But these days you can't have that because we need data going to historians. We need data to be evaluated, and so we're going to have server technologies that are in there, and you can communicate to those via serial. But these days everything is Ethernet based, which means that it's going to be an Ethernet network, which means it's going to have an IP address. Yes. So a network. So what is the path to the internet? Now, sometimes that's through the IT organization. Sometimes it's a cellular modem. Sometimes it's a Raspberry Pi with a cellular shield that somebody dropped off in there. And we've seen the gambit of those. So when you say air gapped, or when you say isolated systems, and I'm going to test that, that's what I'm looking for. Okay. First of all, I ask operations, how do you get your data? Where is it flowing? Where is it going through? Right? What are those communications? Second, I ask, how do your integrators? Because a lot of the example I like to use is that some areas, they've got large compressors, and those compressors are run by jet turbine engines. Okay. Having a jet turbine mechanic on staff 24 hours a day is really expensive because it's not just one. That means you have to have 2 or 3. Those people are expensive. So what happens is they outsource that to the vendor or to the integrator that put it in. So they have the jet turbine mechanic on call. So first of all, how do they get their data? And then when there's a problem, how do they get in? Okay. So I start asking those questions, right? So it is isolated. Well, it's isolated from the internet. However, these people can get in through this VPN. All of a sudden now, VPN. Now we're connected to the internet at some point, or cellular or something like that. So I ask those questions. And when you ask me, am I using that thought process during my assessments? Absolutely. I'm asking, okay, the first thing I ask, and a lot of people are just like, all right, so we're going to start looking at the operating system. I'm like, I don't even want to, we will get to the operating systems, right? We'll understand those vulnerabilities, those configuration, those implementation issues that are built in. Right now, I want to know how data is flowing in and how data is flowing out, right? That's your enforcement boundaries. Okay, so that not only does that account for secure remote access, but also your segmentation. So yes, I use this in my day-to-day. It's also why that's why we wrote it up. It's also why you can do passive assessments passive before you go active. And what I mean by that is reading documentation, reading network PCAPs to understand data flow before you ever put your own packet on the wire. So you can do a complete security assessment. Can't do a pen test, right? Because you're not looking for implementation issues you can take advantage of. But you can do a security assessment without ever scanning the environment. And that's by looking at network diagrams and asking questions, doing interviews. And so, yes, I use that approach to focus my questions and the threads I pull as I'm talking to people. Does that answer your question?
Cool. Yes, and I'm sure also you apply the 613 methodology.
I mean, that's what we built into 613. So now, Jason, Tyler, and I, because we came in, it's pretty funny when I listen to Tim Conway, who kind of heads up the SANS ICS program. He is playing this, trying to figure out how to get these people from 3 different backgrounds that are all important. Right, they're experiencing 3 different approaches. Jason from the OT, he builds things and delivers these things and does security around that. Tyler's like they're constantly doing pen tests, and me, I'm doing pen tests and security assessments, and and dealing with 62443 and regulatory stuff. It takes all 3 of us to make this class successful. If I did it, I'd be focused too much on my one thing. but Jason and Tyler's and my our three combined approaches to it. Now it takes us a while. We're all alphas, so it's like mine's important, mine's important, mine's important. So we're like, and we're moving it around to help people to we went through a period of moving things around a little bit to make it palatable to people as well, right? That don't understand what's important, or they're the pew pew pews. I just want to show. I want to know how to break things, right? So we've had to come up with a smart, useful way to do all of that. I think it's in there, but it would not be as successful or as good as it is right now if it hadn't been for all three of us.
Nice. It's nice. A nice combo. Nice balance. Okay. Please tell me the market also in America, USA. For OT security practitioners, is the salary good? Is it attractive for people to join? What's the range from your experience?
So it's still small. It's still small. Oh, and it's OT is like, it's not even 10% of what IT is. Okay, and actually, I've got friends that that do this, that are constantly getting called. They're still getting called, but they've got all of those different domains that they can do, whether it's zero trust or web or database or mobile, MDM, cloud, and all of that stuff. They've got a lot of challenges. Now we're starting to ingest all of that into our environments, but it's very focused, and the skill sets are focused as well, meaning that there's not going to be a lot of penetration. And so, to get back to your question, OT is a huge problem because it has such a wide-ranging impact, but there's not a lot of people. So it's becoming more popular. Like more people are training, more people are asking about it. I mean, all you have to do is look at the other like the generic, the kind of stuff that I was putting out, like ICS Village has training, but then all of these other like smaller, like online training organizations, they've all got some OT aspects. So they've all realized that this is a growing market. People are interested. People are understanding this. So it's in the United States, in North America, and I would say in Europe. Europe is really big around this, and I'd say Europe's really big around this because, like you, for the past 5 years, they've been seeing that influence. Now, y'all were getting it a little bit. I mean, just because of where you're at and all of the normal political unrest, but now you're seeing like a huge wave of this. So Europe actually. From a OT cybersecurity, this is important, and Europe's a little bit ahead of US on some of this stuff, which is weird and interesting. But it's all related to impact. People are seeing impact, both business and on the ground within the society. In the US, it's more just like, keep the power on. Yeah, we got to keep the power on. Oh yeah, we need to make sure the water's clean. Gas prices going up. Colonial Pipeline, that first incident made it apparent, but really didn't put the emphasis like a actual war does on our society. So we're still kind of the public isn't like that. The public's like that. The companies understand this a lot better, and so the companies are looking at it and so forth. But people wanting to do this, it's kind of a nice to have still, right? So, but we're seeing that change. We're seeing that the kind of pickup. Military, we're going to see so the military has obviously been ahead of this. All militaries are, around the world. So I'm not like giving away anything, but military personnel are getting this type of OT training because it's important around weapon systems and, powering buildings and powering their bases and stuff like that. So as those people start rolling out, they're going to have these skill sets. And so once those people get out and into the business world, we'll see it kind of blossoming up a little bit. But just because the people know how to do it, know how to give these assessments and make these decisions, It doesn't mean that the organization knows how to use them. And so even if people are getting this training and interested, it doesn't mean that the businesses know how to use them. So that's kind of what I'm seeing in North America, advancing a lot faster in the EU and in the Middle East.
Nice. So you said number of jobs is little in the US, but it's increasing. That's good.
Yeah.
What about the business? I mean, the businesses, do they pay well for people who do OT security in US? Is it lucrative?
I mean, it's it really depends on the organization. Now, so that's another challenge, sir. And it's actually one of the things that I added a slide to the 613 that was talking about CapEx and OpEx, capital expenditures versus operational expenditures. When we're talking, and it's kind of why we're in this situation in OT. It's one of the factors why some of these organizations don't move as quickly towards securing their environments, and that's because they're used to capital expenditures. They're used to spending a lot of money to get physical things, to get controllers and devices and pipes and sensors, and they'll spend a lot of that money up front, capital expenditure, because building it and getting it running. But once they get it running, they're like, make sure it just operates. And what they do is they actually plan out that operations 20 years out. They're like, okay, so our operational expenditures to here are here. Over time, they will accelerate, right? But we're willing to accept that because our capital expenditures, we spend a lot up front, but we're going to make a lot of money off of this, a building product or delivering the services. So it'll pay for itself until 2030. And then we're going to decide whether or not we need to revamp it or shut it down or sell it off, right? And so they make this decision, all right, based on that operational expenditure prediction that was done 10 years ago.
Okay.
Okay. So their operational expenditures for the next 30 years has been planned. I'll just use I get
it.
Yeah, like to the cent. Like, okay, here's our expectation, and they change over the years, right? Was cybersecurity a part of that? It wasn't. So if they've allocated all of their funding to normal operations, now all of a sudden we're telling them, hey, add on cybersecurity. Where does the money come from? Do we just magically start making more money? Well, we start charging more, so prices go up, right? So we have to figure out. So when we're talking, and why I'm talking about this, you ask the question: are people paying for this? Well, I think at first they were like, okay, and this is what I talked about. Like they're like, okay, we'll pay for this pen test now, and they get a report. They're like, okay, is this report good for 10 years? Because they don't have money to pay for it again.
Yeah.
And so they don't know, and so it's difficult for them to wrap their head around, or even to justify these new expenditures that they didn't predict. However, and that's a leadership thing. Leadership needs to start dedicating more money to this. They have to shift some of the funding that they have on IT. Has usually lots of operational expenditures, but they expect the OT to have low operational expenditures because of the high capital costs at the beginning. So, I mean, they do this balancing act. Well, they're going to have to start calculating in their head, how do they have a cybersecurity program? Because it's not a one-off. You don't just buy Fortinet firewalls or Fortinet analyzers and put it in place. You don't just buy Nozomi and Dragos and then you're good to go, right? No, it takes tuning, it takes maintenance, it takes training, right? And it takes some of that bringing on people, whether it's specialized people outside or dedicating a new team, right? Hiring people. And what is that? Operational expenditure, OpEx, which they don't have any money for, right? So when you ask me, is this lucrative? It can be, because it's specialized, right? Meaning that if you can demonstrate to yourself that you have the training and you have the experience and you understand operational environments, you can make a good amount of money. However, are they willing to spend that? They're used to vendors that lowball, that come in, that realize that, hey, you don't have a lot of operational expenditures, so we have to bring these. We're undercutting everybody left and right, right?
Yes.
But we're a specialized skill set, so we expect to be making more. So it's a difficult challenge, and it's not just US. That's everywhere.
Yes.
Everybody. This is business, right? And business crosses borders, right? And so this is the challenge that people are making right now. So in any society, this can be lucrative. However,
Yes.
It's not lucrative if they're not willing to pay for it. They have to have that plan, right? So yeah, I don't know if that answers your question, but that's the answer.
It's very clear. And I was reading an article yesterday about the CRA in Europe. Now they put all the vendors in trouble and the organizations, because now they forced it to get rid of the expired products, expired services for the vendors and the clients. So now even the clients now have to rethink, we have to obey or we're going to be fined by the CRA. So Europe is pushing and everybody to spend money, whether the vendors or the organizations that use them.
Well, I like the approach. I mean, there's challenges all around, on all sides of that implementation. How do we find it? Like, what is actually their problem, or what was somebody's? Because vendors have been writing up their, how to secure these things. They've been adding it for the last 5+. I mean, but that was already in there. When you can go back and look at, like, okay, yeah, they started adding these things 5 years ago. But where they're actually being implemented. There's one thing to have a secure product that was developed securely, that passes all of the security development lifecycle. Right?
Yeah,
that's you can do that, and then you can implement it badly, or you can have one intern that goes in and or one intern. Always picking on the interns, right? You can have one person that goes in, and instead of putting it in run mode, they put it in program mode, right? Or they throw that cellular modem in. Right now, the vendor's not going to get fined for that. Okay.
No.
So, a part of the thing that regulation does is we think we've shifted the response. Some organizations are going to think, oh, well, we shifted the responsibility to Rockwell or Siemens or and so forth. No, you've just helped them reduce some of those implementation issues, right? But it has to follow their configuration guidelines. It has to follow their maintenance guidelines, their tuning guidelines, and so forth. And they're only that only helps their one product. So if you have a homogeneous environment, in other words, everything's just that one vendor, then maybe you're okay. However, no operational environments like that. It's heterogeneous. They'll be heavy to one side, but as you start adding things that are necessary, as you get new technologies from other vendors and from other integrators, some things that a lot of people don't realize is that all of these plants change hands left and right, meaning that they get sold. Now, like in Saudi Arabia, that's a little bit different, but all around the world, but even in the Middle East, you have one organization that's operating it one day, then they sell and they give it off to somebody else, some other organization. How are they managing it? And how did you do all the transfer of that knowledge and that data and stuff like that? And connect? And did you do all of that understanding before you connected it to your environment or to your cloud? So, it's while, regulation is a good step forward, and holding people accountable to their security development lifecycle is important. It's not security. It's a part of the program.
It's part, yes, exactly. Well, it's a big topic, and we've really talked a lot today about
stuff. How are you going to do the description for that?
It's going to be a full article, just in Skype. Which is, I'm glad, I'm really looking forward, to this meeting, and it's good. It went well.
As soon as you read that, I was like, it was awesome, because I remember your project before. I've seen it. You did some of that good research, and I'm excited about your podcast, and I'm glad you're putting it out there. I think it's important. So thank you for doing this and putting that information out for everybody.
Thank you, Don, and it's been really to talk to you finally. Normally, I just watch you. Thank you very much. Okay, guys, I think that's it for today, and take care. Bye bye.
Thank you.